Welcome back, everyone. Professor Giles here. We are going to get right into chapter 6, 7, and 8. This is a huge week covering a lot of work, and we're trying to get ready for the midterm that comes up next Monday. So getting through these will be very important. And that will set us up towards going into next week with the High Renaissance. Only giving you one chapter next week. Um, so, but I think that's really one of the most important chapters for us. The High Renaissance is just going to be hopefully seeing some of the greatest and best artwork. And I think the textbook does pretty good with it. I'll be showing probably a lot more next week with only that one chapter. This week looking at the early medieval and Romanesque, and then Gothic, and then going into the early Renaissance. With these three chapters, I'm going to try to go ahead and keep those down to 15 minutes apiece and just fly through them. Although in the Gothic, really hitting the cathedrals hard, and then hitting the early Renaissance, especially Northern Europe Renaissance, is going to be very important. So I'm just going to jump right in here and try to breeze right through and see how we do on our time limit. So I've got about 13 minutes left or so. So let's start here with the early medieval and Romanesque. Okay, talking about the hallmarks of medieval, this area sort of falls into a very rough area. In the past, medieval would be called, thank you, phone, would be called the Dark Ages. That's really not accurate because there was still art going on. It wasn't like everything just shut down. As we look at the map here, remember, the Roman Empire is divided in two, Constantinople controlling the eastern, Rome controlling the west, and the west falls in around the 400s or so. So society really takes a hit. This cohesiveness and homogeneity of culture really falls apart. It's not controlled by Rome anymore. So what comes into play is a regional design aesthetic. You no longer can go out and trade with faraway lands. You have to rely on what you have in your area here. So this regional aesthetic comes into play. Also, the lack of realism, especially during this part, the realism really declines. That artists probably have trained. Sure, they could have done it. They weren't stupid people or bad artists. Just it didn't dictate that realism that was going on, that was dictated by the Roman Empire. Okay, we actually see that even during the Byzantine and the early Rome, that the artwork was starting to go away, the realism part. Then we see an emergence of illuminated manuscripts. Illuminated manuscripts really are some of the heights of the medieval before we get into the Romanesque. Here is a piece that's in the book, a purse cover. This is, on my screen at least, is about a third larger than the original. What you're looking at here is gold. Even the hinges are gold. This would have been probably on a leather purse. And this is the flap that tops it off. And what we see here, the gold is designed in such a way that it leaves the raised areas that we see as gold, but then what is in color here, that is depressed areas. And then that is filled with enamel, which is pulverized glass with a color to it. And these people were marvelous artists. Look at the checkerboard effect in that. And that is maybe a 1/4 of an inch across, probably smaller. And notice there's a design here of maybe a dog or a wolf or some sort of animal looks like it's attacking a human being. But notice how stylized it is. Um, so what we see here is that regionalism coming in. This is the artwork of that region. This is not Rome telling this region what to create. This is the freedom to create what you want within what your tribe or what your region does. Okay. Now that leads us down into the illuminated manuscripts that look like this. Now, illuminated manuscripts are books that are all hand created. Manuscript means written by hand. Manus meaning hand, script meaning written. So manuscript. Now this is the Lindisfarne Gospels. It's 4 Gospels together, and the book does a good job of explaining that. I won't go into that, but I want you to look at the detail here a little bit farther than what the book has. This is the beginning of the text in the Greek, I believe, or no, I'm sorry, the Latin. And then over here is a carpet page, and this is a graphic representation, sort of like an icon of that, or branding of that gospel to make it different than the other gospels. This is Matthew. And here we have a very close-up view of this gospel. And you see these bird designs. There's a head, there's an eye, neck, body, wing, feet. And the feet come down here and clasp onto other feet of other birds. And its tail comes down here and becomes part of this design. In a way, loosely, we'd say, call this sort of like Celtic design. So it's very much of that region. And different regions have their own artwork. This is just one that is very famous. Now, one piece that could be on the midterm exam is this piece within also the Lindisfarne Gospels, the carpet page of St. John's Gospel. Now, there would have been another page here with the beginning of the text, but this is just another view of this really fine and wonderful design work. This also features birds and the cross. So each of the 4 Gospels have those design elements, birds, the cross, but they're different in how they're executed. Now, if we move over to Germany, we see this really wonderful, but again, rough and simplified view. This is much more illustrative, more realistic than the very stylized up in Ireland and England in their Gospels. But we see the 4 Gospel writers here on this opening page as they're thinking about and being inspired what to write in their Gospels. It is much more realistic. They're wearing togas. They're sitting on these plush seats with their feet raised up. You can see little toes. You can see writing instruments. You can see their faces. The book that he's writing in, the pose, he has his head down thinking. Even the sort of icon that represents that gospel. Gospel of John is always represented by an eagle. And we'll see that later on in different periods. So again, very much in that region and very simplified. But especially with the rise of Charlemagne, we start to see a little bit more cohesiveness as the Holy Roman Empire is created. And the book does a pretty good job of talking about that. So we'll move on to Romanesque. Okay, Romanesque really is the first design that takes on, since Roman times, takes on this full effect. And it affects most of Europe, even over into the Byzantine area that is still going strong at this point. What to look for and try to identify short height within their buildings. They can't go very high because they don't have concrete anymore. Brick and stone is what they have to build with. The rounded arch, symbolizing heaven, very much a part of this style. Small windows, although some have some larger windows, they're still small, especially in comparison to what we see underneath Gothic in their exterior details, they're still trying to get back, or what they are trying to do is get back to that look of Rome. Columns and arches and just that look, because they can see the ruins around them of what their society used to be. Now they're trying to reforge something new in that style of Rome. And here's a typical building. Okay, what's Roman about it? Look at the pediment, that triangle. It looks like a temple in rough layout. Here is an apse from the Roman basilicas. This is probably a small chapel. Notice the small windows. Have to have a lot of candles going to have your services. Okay, so candles become really a part of the religious look, sort of almost like a mysticism or a spiritual feel, to have a dark room with all of these candles going. Here's another one that is really one of the very first confirmed Romanesque buildings. It's the Palatine Chapel in Aachen, Germany. Very similar to what we see in San Vitale with the round octagon look to it. But they've taken it actually to new heights. Instead of being a low building, this is several floors tall. Notice the archways, rounded, small windows. It is being built somewhat tall, but that's as far as they could go before the building would start collapsing on itself due to its own weight. Arches are great for distributing the weight from above down the piers, okay, the sides of the arch. But they can only go so far here. And here is Charlemagne's throne that was up on the second floor of this building, overlooking this area. And for you Lord of the Ring fans, notice the similarity between this style and the White City, the end of Lord of the Rings. And now, of course, I have a mind fail. So anyway, take a look at that, and you see a connection where those artists are looking at this to portray that society. Okay, something to really get down on here is vaults. Understand vaults. That a vault is holding up weight. It's like an arch, but there's different types. Barrel vault is an arch that actually goes back into space. So this ceiling looks like a barrel, thus, or a tunnel. Or a groin vault, where they intersect each other and the groin becomes this X that's created on the ceiling. So you have this way and you have this way, okay, an intersection at 90-degree angles. Okay, and then a dome is actually just an arch turned around at 180 degrees. Okay, I'm going to go through here. These are all Romanesque. Notice how low they are. Pisa, love it. Notice the bottom here is very Romanesque on this baptistry. Rounded arches, but then once you get above that, it becomes very Gothic because it took so long to build. When they got to this point, a new style had really taken over. So they added to it and made it into more of a split level of Romanesque and Gothic above. But the cathedral back here is very much Romanesque. And very quickly, there's that, and I've got 20 seconds, and the Battle of Hastings on the Bayeux Tapestry. Take a look at that. Look that up on Google. This is a marvelous piece. All of this is it's not woven, but hand-tied knots of thread. Look into that in some detail. That could be on your midterm also, and it's on the list. Okay, so next we'll go on into the Gothic.